Hello everyone. Today I want to talk to you about something that is been in the industry for about it's a phenomenon. It's something that's been happening in the software development industry for about maybe six or 5 years. Um, if you're in the industry already, if you're reading blogs or you're seeing people, talking online about things, you will notice that there's a rise of JavaScript. A lot of people now are more interested into writing their web applications and server applications in JavaScript. And that's simply because JavaScript comes in as a pretty loose language. It's not so judgmental when it comes to what properties are you calling on an object that is defined, or you don't need an IDE to run your entire applications. All you need to do, if you're using a web browser like this, you could just click F12 and you could just do like var x equal 10, and then I want to say x plus 10 and it gives me 20. It's really fast, something that is super fast that you could just look at and be like, all right, I understand. I need to learn programming. I don't want to install a boatload of apps and IDEs to write some software, so I'm just going to go with JavaScript. And because a lot of people, new graduates, they want to have like a new way to approach the technology, and they don't want to have to learn stuff like polymorphism or abstraction, dependency injection, and stuff like that. They just want to write something and it works. So some company that started in, of course, before I say that, like this caused a little bit of gap between already senior software engineers in the industry that are already familiar with strongly typed programming languages like Java and C Sharp and programming languages like that, versus a whole new generation of people that are writing things in JavaScript. So that puts this team and this team in a little bit of disadvantage, because these folks, there's nothing in common between these two folks that they could communicate based on. Um, some attempts from people like Node.js, which is saying, okay, we don't even want strongly typed programming languages to take over server apps. We want to write server apps and client apps in both in JavaScript. So Node started, and people started writing server apps in Node, and Node became just as easy as writing a web application in JavaScript on the client side. Technically, if you have a terminal and you just type in Node, now you are in Node. Now you're writing server-side code, and you could just go ahead and do exactly the same thing I did earlier, and it just works. So what about strongly typed programming language experts and professionals? Some people found a lot of flaws in JavaScript. The folks who wrote Angular, they put on their web page is that they couldn't really understand. Their code started to get bigger and bigger, and they couldn't really understand what their code is doing because it's not typed. It's not strongly typed. It's all pure JavaScript. So they started moving into writing their new Angular, which is Angular 2, in TypeScript. TypeScript is basically a Microsoft product that allows you to write in JavaScript but with types. And it has a little bit of differences between what actually JavaScript looks like and what TypeScript looks like. And that is a great attempt. A lot of people have bought into it. Angular 2 is written into it, but it's still not exactly a C Sharp. It's still not exactly a Java. It's still not exactly any of those strongly typed programming languages like Scala or any other programming language. So some company started in 2008. They're called ObjectNet. This company said, If JavaScript developers found out a way to write in JavaScript on the server side, why can't we have our already strongly typed programming languages to write stuff on the client side? So they want people to go the other way. People started from JavaScript client side, and with server side they did Node, they did React, Backbone, whatever frameworks for the front end, and then they did Node. These folks said, okay, we already know C#, we're really good at it. We want to move that forward to the client side. And I'm not talking about Razor here. I'm not talking about annotations that you put in your HTML and then it gets compiled and rendered on the server and then sent back out to the client. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something that gets deployed. It creates zero interaction with the server. It's just running purely on the client side. Unless you want it to talk to the server, then this is a whole completely different story. Even JavaScript, pure JavaScript, will do that for you. So these folks here have a pretty neat timeline. They started in 2008, and they started building in stuff, pretty good applications all over. And then in March 2015, they built something called BridgeNet. I'm going to click on the link here. What BridgeNet, literally by definition, what BridgeNet is a tool that allows you to compile C# into JavaScript that actually makes sense to the browser to compile and run. And on their webpage, of course, their project is open source. So if you're going to GitHub, you could literally pull in the project. I just pulled in the project and I compiled it, and actually compiles. You could contribute to the project, but that's a whole different story. What I want to tell you here is they actually built something that makes sense for C# developers to write, and it would still get translated to JavaScript, and it will render on the client side. And then one of the neat things they have on their website is you get to actually take a look at their implementation without having to install none of their tools. You could just go to Try Live. They already have an example for you in there. I've been playing around with this for a while. Let me bring that guy down in here, and let me clear out the world here. I don't want you to be affected with none of that. We want to completely start from scratch. All right. So what are we going to do here? We're going to write C#. So I'm just going to do class my program, right? And public static void main, just your typical function, just a simple function. It translates it into JavaScript. You don't have to worry about that part because your C# code, understanding your C# code is enough. It's more than enough. So let's start with something simple. I'm going to just go ahead and say console.write line, that's C#, and I'm going to say hello world, just like any other program out there, and it prints out hello world. It translates your code, your C# code, into something that is understandable to the client side, and then it renders it and makes it happen. Let's do something a little more complex. Let's go in, let's create a class. Let's call it student, and let's say student has a ID. So let's say it's an integer, ID, get, set, and then that student also has a name. So I have a student class, and then inside this class I get to actually build, let's say, a list of students, and that list of students has a, let's say, 2 students. So here's a new student, and the ID is 1, and the name is Hassan. I'm going to put my brother in there, so it's going to be another student. Number 2, name Hussein. Okay, I built my list. Somehow it understood that completely as is. And then let's go crazy here. Let's say students dot for each student. For each student, I want to do something. I want a console dot write line student dot ID. Let's use C#7 interpolation here, string interpolation magic. So let's say ID student.id, and let's do student.name. So I'm just printing out, and as you see, as I'm typing, it understands system collections. It understands. It's crazy. It's really crazy, because I don't care about this part. This is for the browser. Think of it as your minified version of your normal JavaScript. But the cool part here is that you just write C# for the client side, and you never have to worry about it being rendered on the server and then pushed back out. So that's just the beginning. That's what these people did. And Dict.net is something that this company, ObjectNet, also created. They mentioned in their website they have created that guy just very recently in September 2016. So, okay, we have that. Really cool stuff, really innovative. How does that work in real life? Let's say I want to build, let's start with something very simple. I want to build a little application, HTML application that will take in my C# code and does something simple with it. So here's my Visual Studio. I'm just going to go ahead and start a new project. And I'm going to do a class library, and I'm going to say YouTube demo, just any name really. How does that really work? How do we look like in a real project? It's cool on the web. I'm sold already. I want to see if I can do that in an actual project. So we have a class here. Let's call our class my web. Let's call it web program. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, web program. Everything is cool. And I'm going to go ahead here and pull in that bridge.net magic into my project. So I'm going to use NuGet packages, and I'm going to browse, and I'm going to look for bridge. If I know how to type, bridge.net, which is this guy. It's created by ObjectNet. 12,000 downloads. Not as popular, but I hope it does get popular, because this is really amazing. This is a big leap to build a bridge between a back-end developers that want to write front-end web applications. So let me install this guy. All right. Pulling the magic in, adding packages. All right, everything's great. If you look at your project now, you'll notice they have a new folder called Bridge, right? And you have a www and you have output. And I'll explain to you what these folders are for. Your demo is basically your HTML file that references whatever your C# compiled JavaScript look like. So let's start with something super simple. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to build just a normal function. And I'm going to say this function is, let's say, public static. It doesn't matter really. Let's say a list. I just want to return a list of strings. Let's say get all strings. And what I'm returning here is a list of strings. And I'm just going to put some stuff in here. I'm going to put Hassan, Hussein, whatever, John, whatever comes to mind. new list in here, so we're returning that. So I'm returning here a list of strings with this function. Cool. Now I want to build another function. I'm going to call it main. And what this function is going to have, it's going to have an annotation called ready. And ready means when all the components on your HTML page are already loaded, go ahead and execute that function. So what I'm going to do here is something very simple. I'm going to say list strings. I'm just going to call that function in. I'm going to say my strings, or let's say list of strings. And I'm going to call get all strings. Now this one might complain because this is a static function. I need to be static here as well. Let's do that. Static, like that. And let's do get all strings. Right, I want that to go out on a web page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say list of strings for each one of those guys. For each, it might ask me to bring in collections. So that's a let's say str, because string is already a reserved keyword. I'm going to say console.writeLine str as is, and it does not like for each because it doesn't have system collections. I use something called bridge.link. Wow, I did not even know that. So let's take that guy out. They have their own web compiler for that. So what this is going to do when the document is ready, which is demo.html, it'll execute the command for each, and it will print out each one of those strings. So let's build that project. When you rebuild the project, it goes and it does this whole interpretation thing. It does the compiling and interpretation. And I know you're probably asking me right now, where's that compiled JavaScript? I'll show you in a second. So we have now demo.html that's referencing that stuff. Let's run demo. Let's go here and say view in a browser. So this here, that's Bridge console, but that's not what the browser is actually putting out there. If you do F12, that's what's actually coming out in here. Now let's go on the network and let's refresh that page. Zero network interaction, nothing. We didn't go back to the back end. We didn't do anything. We just wrote in pure JavaScript, pure C#, and it just printed out as JavaScript. Let's take this guy up a notch. How did this happen? Where's the JavaScript that's being executed? I can't close that guy, I don't need it. Where's the JavaScript that's being executed to have this guy come out like this? We know already that these web browsers do not understand C#. It only understands JavaScript, and maybe in the future WebAssembly, which a lot of people are talking about to hook it up to whatever programming languages they're interested in. So where's that JavaScript? If you go in here in the output, and if you view all the hidden files, you will notice that there's about 5 files in here: Bridge.js and Bridge minified.js, which is literally the same thing, it's just faster to parse for the browsers. Is the actual libraries, not what you wrote. It's what interprets what you wrote into actual thing you could do on the browser. And YouTube demo.js and YouTube demo minified.js is actually your code. So this here is what my C# code looks like when it was interpreted to JavaScript. Let's look at the difference here. So what it takes to do something like this, as simple as this, is to do something like this. And I know some people who are very familiar with JavaScript, they will say we could just use underscore and do the for each and all of that, but I don't want to learn that. I already know a programming language that that allows me to communicate with mobile, with Xamarin, with servers, web applications, and even web applications like ASP.NET MVC. But I want to communicate with you, JavaScript developer, to write things you understand. So this is what comes out of it, and it's pretty amazing actually, because it doesn't just stop there. It goes up a little bit further than that. Let's say I only want this function to execute when I click a button. So is it really client-side? Let's go and demo in here. Let's throw in a button. Let's say button, name, button 1, and let's say execute. Now I didn't do anything yet with that button, so I'm just gonna go in here and refresh my page, and I expect to see a button execute. Great, here's my button. It doesn't do anything yet. Let's hook up something to that button from C#. Not touching jQuery, not touching anything, from C# directly. If I go to my web program here and I have the ready, I could just go find that button, just like any other thing. If you're writing Xamarin, Android, or whatnot, you need to go find that control and then hook up stuff to it. So let's take these guys out in a function. Or don't worry about that. We'll do that in a second. Let's find that button first. So let's say button var button 1 equal, and it doesn't matter, just call it whatever you want. Let's say my button equals, and then document dot query. I want to find that guy, so query selector, and then I want the HTML button element, and then I need to reference that button by its name, so I called it button 1 as far as I remember. Now I want to hook up something to that button, so only things will execute when that button is clicked. So I'm going to go ahead and say my button dot on click. And then on click, I'm just going to do a crazy, quick, anonymous function. That's a function that doesn't have a name. And have that code in here execute when the button is clicked. So when my button's clicked, it will list all these strings that I have in here. That's technically what this guy does. So I'm just going to go here and rebuild my solution to have the compiling happening. Yes to all. You'll notice that this guy have changed. Don't worry about that. That's gibberish. Let's go in and refresh our page. So I refreshed my page here. Nothing is happening. Look at... okay. You have a little problem. Name. Let's give this guy an ID instead. Let's go in here and say that's an ID. And just like any selector, instead of saying button 1, I'm just going to say hash button 1. So that'll find the button. Let's build the world. And let's refresh this guy. You shouldn't see that problem anymore. When I click execute, boom, it shows you the names. So literally, you've been typing C#, you haven't touched JavaScript, you found the element, you made it do some things, done. Let's go out a little further. Let's have an element. Now you have all you need really, because if you know C# and you know how to, and if you know how to find elements on the web page, now the world is yours to do whatever you want. Like link your logic to the front end elements, and everything else becomes like really easy. Let's just for kicks, let's have a text box in here, and let's put something in that text box with that button. Visual Studio, and let's add in a text box. And let's give it an ID, text box 1. I still hold these things from back when I was doing desktop applications with Windows Forms applications. The default thing for all controls are text box 1, button 1, and so on. Alright, we want this button, when I click OK to put in a value in the text box that says hello, for instance. So as you may have guessed, I'm just going to say, go here and say my text box. And then I'm going to go find that element, query selector, HTML input element. And we called it text box1, I think. All right, that's text box1. And instead, we want to say my text box1 dot is it text or value equals hello Hassan, something like that. Will that work? I don't know. Let's find out. Let's rebuild our application. Let's go to the web browser, refresh. I'm not seeing any errors. Click the button, hello Hassan. Magic. I love it. BridgeNet. I love it. You can build anything you want in there and not have to worry about JavaScript. This should allow back-end developers who want to write things that use really sophisticated front-end using some frameworks. You could write a library, just a little library, and then have this C# compiled to JavaScript library being referenced in your React JS or your Angular JS or your Backbone, whatever your framework is, and not have to worry about callback hell. You don't have to worry about, not having strongly typed variables, objects, whatnot. It's pretty amazing. Give it a shot. Thank you for watching.